Amina Cole stood in front of the mahogany desk, her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. 5 men in dark suits surrounded her, but her eyes were locked on only one. The man seated behind the desk, fingers steepled, watching her with a kind of stillness that made predators successful. Park Min-ho didn't blink. He simply waited. "Please pay me $500 for one night with you." Amina's voice came out steadier than she expected. Min-ho's expression didn't change. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly. His eyes traveled over her, not with the hunger she'd braced herself for, but with something closer to confusion. She was beautiful, exhausted, and desperate. Especially desperate. "Say that again," he said, his voice low, controlled. Amina's hands trembled at her sides. She forced them still. $500, one night. I'll do whatever you want. Just... Her breath caught. "Please." She didn't cry. That was what unsettled him most. Min-ho studied the woman before him. 29, maybe 30. Dark brown skin that seemed to glow even under the harsh office lights. Natural hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Clothes that had been washed too many times. But it was her eyes that held him. Soft, brown eyes filled with something he recognized from his own mirror years ago. "Everyone out," Min-ho said quietly. The men filed out without question. Ji-woo hesitated at the door, his sharp eyes moving between his boss and the woman. Min-ho gave him a single nod. The door clicked shut. Amina stood alone with him now. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her chin up. She'd come this far. There was no turning back. "Sit," Min-ho said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I'd rather stand." "Sit." Not a request this time. She sat. Min-ho opened a drawer, pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He poured slowly, deliberately, then slid one across the desk toward her. She didn't touch it. "Why me?" he asked. "You're the only person I know who deals in cash." Her voice was flat, rehearsed. "No questions, no paperwork. Just a transaction. And you think I'm the kind of man who buys women. I think you're the kind of man who understands when someone has run out of options." He picked up his glass, swirled the amber liquid, but didn't drink. "What's your name? Does it matter?" "Yes." She swallowed. "Amina. Amina Cole." "Amina." He said it carefully, like he was testing the weight of it. "Why 500? Why not 1,000? Why not more?" "Because that's exactly what I need." "For what?" "That's my business." Min-ho set down his glass with a soft clink. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket, and walked around the desk. Amina's breath quickened, but she didn't move. He stopped, in front of her, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of his cologne. Something expensive. Something that reminded her she didn't belong in this room. "I accept," he said. Relief and horror washed over her. Her hands gripped the arms of the chair. "Tonight," he continued, "my penthouse, Ji-woo will drive you." "Now, do you have somewhere else to be?" She thought of Esme, of the small room where her daughter should be sleeping, of the empty bed that had stayed empty for 365 days. "No," Amina whispered. "I don't." The penthouse was everything she expected and nothing she was prepared for. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline. Furniture that probably cost a fortune. Silence so complete, it felt sacred. Min-ho poured himself another drink at the bar. He'd removed his jacket, loosened his tie. The tattoos on his neck were more visible now. Characters she couldn't read, designs that spoke of allegiances and debts paid in blood. "You can use the bathroom if you need to," he said without looking at her. "Shower, whatever you need to get ready." Amina stood near the door, her purse clutched in front of her like a shield. "I just want to get this over with." "Amina, relax. No one's judging you here." "Okay," she said, her voice barely steady. Something flickered across his face. Not quite sympathy, not quite regret. "Take off your jacket." Her fingers moved to the zipper of her hoodie. It stuck halfway. She yanked at it, frustrated, humiliated. He crossed the room in 3 strides and brushed her hands away. His fingers were warm, efficient. The zipper slid down smoothly. "Thank you," she muttered. "Don't thank me for this." He guided her toward the bedroom. The lights were dimmed. The bed was massive, covered in sheets that probably had thread counts she couldn't pronounce. She sat on the edge, her body rigid. Minho stood at the foot of the bed, watching her. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. There are other ways to get money. Not for me, not anymore." She looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw the cracks in her armor. "Please, I need this. Just do what you paid for." He unbuttoned his shirt slowly. She looked away, her hands fisted in the sheets. The night happened. Not the way she'd imagined. Not brutal, but not gentle either. Clinical, mechanical. She flinched when he touched her shoulder, apologized when she couldn't stop shaking, kept checking the clock on the nightstand. 11:47, 12:23, 1:08. At one point, when his hand moved to her face, she turned away and whispered, "I'm sorry. I just need this to be over." Minho stopped. His hand hovered in the air between them. "What did you say?" "Nothing. I'm sorry. Keep going." But he didn't. He pulled back, sat on the edge of the bed with his back to her. The silence stretched. "This isn't right," he said finally. Amina sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. "I'm so sorry. You paid and you should get what you paid for. That's the deal. The deal is wrong. It's too late to have a conscience." He stood, found his pants, pulled them on. "Get dressed." Panic seized her. No, please. I need..." "You'll still get your money." He turned to look at her, and his expression was unreadable. But not like this. She dressed with shaking hands. He didn't watch. When she was done, he handed her an envelope. She opened it, counted the bills. $500, exact. "Why?" she asked. "Whatever you're going through, this isn't the answer." Amina bowed slightly, a gesture of respect mixed with shame. "Thank you for not asking questions." She left before he could respond. The morning light was cruel. Amina walked through the streets of Seoul with the envelope pressed against her chest, beneath her hoodie. People rushed past her on their way to work, to school, to lives that made sense. She felt like a ghost moving among them. She took the subway to Hongdae, climbed 3 flights of stairs to a building with peeling paint and a broken buzzer. The sign on the door read, "International Family Services," in English and Korean. She'd been here 16 times before. This would be the 17th. Mr. Kang sat behind his desk, looking exactly as he always did. Cheap suit, graying hair, eyes that never quite met hers. He was eating kimbap from a convenience store container when she walked in. "Miss Cole?" he said, not bothering to stand. "You're early." "I have the money." That got his attention. He set down his food, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "All of it?" "Yes." She placed the envelope on his desk, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small stack of bills. crumpled, worn, collected from everywhere she could think of. She'd sold her phone 2 weeks ago, her furniture before that. Her wedding ring, the one thing she'd sworn she'd never part with, had gone to a pawn shop in Itaewon for 200,000 won. She counted it all out, $9,500 in various currencies, converted and reconverted until the numbers blurred together. Mr. Kang counted it slowly, wetting his thumb to flip through the bills. Amina stood perfectly still, her heart a drum in her chest. He finished counting, looked up, smiled. 9,500, he said. You're short. The floor tilted beneath her. What? The price is 10,000, has been from the beginning. You said, when I first came here, you said 9,000. That was a year ago. Prices change. Inflation. He shrugged, pushing the money back toward her. Come back when you're serious. Amina's vision blurred. She grabbed the edge of his desk. Please, please, I sold everything. I don't have anything left. Just give me my daughter, please. Business is business, Miss Cole. She's 6 years old. She's just a baby. The words choked off. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Mr. Kang was already back to his kimbap. Close the door on them. Your way out. Amina stumbled out of the office, down the stairs, into the alley behind the building. She made it 3 steps before her legs gave out. She collapsed against the wall, sliding down to the dirty pavement. She didn't cry. Not yet. She was too empty for tears. If you're still watching, please hit that like button and subscribe. This story gets heavier before it gets lighter, and I need to know you're with me. Drop a comment telling me what you'd do in Amina's position. Now, back to the story. Min-ho couldn't focus. The files on his desk might as well have been written in a language he didn't speak. Numbers blurred, names meant nothing. All he could see was her face, the way she'd flinched, the way she'd apologized, the way she'd looked at him like he was her last option in a world that had stripped her of choices. You look distracted, Ji-woo said, setting a coffee on the desk. I'm fine. You've been staring at the same page for 20 minutes. Min-ho closed the What Is For file. The woman from last night. Find out who she is. Ji-woo's expression didn't change, but his posture shifted slightly. Boss. Everything. Where she lives, where she works, why she was desperate enough to walk into my office with that request. And if she's in trouble? Then I want to know what kind. Ji-woo nodded and left. Min-ho sat back in his chair, fingers drumming against the armrest. He'd spent 15 years building an empire on understanding people, their weaknesses, their desires, their breaking points. He knew desperation when he saw it. What he didn't understand was why it bothered him so much. 3 days later, Ji-woo returned with a folder. You're not going to like this, he said, setting it on the desk. Min-ho opened it. Inside were printouts, photographs, documents in English and Korean. He read in silence, his expression hardening with each page. Amina Cole, 29, Nigerian-American, came to Korea 3 years ago on a teaching visa. Married a K-Yo, Korean man named Lee Dong-hyun. Had a daughter. Marriage fell apart. Divorce finalized 2 years ago. Then, the part that made his blood run cold. 1 year ago, her daughter had been taken. Not kidnapped, at least not officially. The father had signed papers. So had someone else. Adoption papers processed through a private agency with connections to wealthy families who didn't want to wait through official channels. Her daughter, Esme, had been renamed Yuna, placed with a family in Gangnam. The adoption was technically legal. Technically. But the signatures were suspicious. The timing convenient, and Amina's name wasn't anywhere on the paperwork. She'd been erased. Minho closed the folder. His jaw tightened. Where's the child now? With the Kim family. They're connected. Father's a prosecutor. Mother's family owns half of Apgujeong. And the agency? International Family Services. Run by a guy named Kang Seok Jin. Small operation. Shady but careful. Nothing we could pin on. Him legally. Minho stood, walked to the window. Seoul spread out before him. Millions of people, millions of secrets. Somewhere in this city was a little girl who didn't know her mother was selling pieces of herself to get her back. Set up a meeting, Minho said quietly. With Miss Cole. Tell her I need to see her. About? Tell her I have questions. Jiwoo hesitated at the door. Boss, if you're thinking about getting involved, I'm already involved. When Amina received the message, her first thought was that he wanted his money back. Her second thought was that he wanted another night. Her third thought was that she didn't have the strength to care either way. She showed up at the address Jiwoo had given her. A small restaurant in Myeongdong, the kind of place that closed for private parties. She was ushered to a back room where Minho sat alone at a low table, 2 cups of tea steaming in front of him. Sit, he said. She sat rigid, preparing for whatever was coming. Who took your child? Minho asked. Amina's breath caught. What? Your daughter? Who took her? The room swayed. She gripped the edge of the table. How do you answer the question? Why? Why do you care? Her voice cracked. You got what you wanted. We had a deal. It's over. It's not over. Not for you. He pushed one of the teacups toward her. Talk. And she did. Not because she wanted to. Not because she trusted him. But because she was so tired of carrying it alone. The words spilled out, halting at first, then faster like a dam breaking. She told him about her ex-husband, about the promises he'd made and broken, about coming home one day to find Esme gone, her toys packed, her room empty, about the police who wouldn't help because the paperwork was legal, about the lawyers who wanted retainers she couldn't afford, about the agency that demanded money she didn't have. She told him about selling everything, about the jobs she'd worked, 3 at a time, sleeping 4 hours a night, about the phone calls that went unanswered, about the doors that slammed in her face. And she told him about that night, about standing in his office, naming her price, knowing exactly what she was trading and not caring because $500 was $500 closer to getting Esme back. By the time she finished, her cheeks were wet. She hadn't noticed when the tears started. Minho sat across from her, perfectly still. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. Where is she now? A family in Gangnam, the Kims. They have money, connections. I can't touch them. I can't even get close. And the agency? They want $10,000. I had $9,500. Her voice broke. They turned me away. Minho picked up his phone, sent a text, set it down. You're going to get your daughter back in the next 48 hours. Amina looked up, tears still streaming. What? He met her eyes, and there was something in his gaze she couldn't name. This isn't right. What happened to you? What happened to her? I'm going to fix it. Why? You don't even know me. No, but I know what it's like to be powerless. He stood, adjusted his jacket. Go home. Rest. Someone will contact you in a few days. I don't understand. You don't need to. Just trust me. She wanted to argue, wanted to demand explanations. But something in his face stopped her. This wasn't pity. This wasn't charity. This was something colder, more calculated. This was justice. What happened next Amina only learned about in pieces, weeks later. Minho made calls, quiet calls, to people who owed him favors, to people who feared him, to people who understood that when Park Minho asked for something, refusal wasn't an option. Lawyers appeared at her door, real lawyers, expensive ones, with papers for her to sign. They asked questions about Dong-hyun, her ex-husband, about the adoption, about every detail she could remember. She answered mechanically, not quite believing it was real. Then the visit started. Officials from the family court, social workers with clipboards and kind eyes. They asked her about Esme's early years, about her routines, her favorite foods, her bedtime stories. Amina answered through tears, her voice shaking. Behind the scenes, Minho's people worked like surgeons. They found inconsistencies in the adoption papers. They traced payments that didn't add up. They discovered that Kang Seok-jin had facilitated 6 other questionable adoptions in the past 3 years. They also discovered that the Kim family, despite their connections, had been sloppy. The adoption had been rushed. Corners had been cut. And when those corners were exposed to the right people, people who valued their reputations more than their conveniences, the Kims found themselves in a very uncomfortable position. Mr. Kang received a visit. Not from police, not at first. From men in dark suits who didn't identify themselves, but made it very clear that his business practices were now under scrutiny. They presented documents, bank records, adoption files with forged signatures, communications that proved he'd been trafficking children under the guise of legal adoption for years. "You have 2 choices," the lead man said, spreading the evidence across Kang's cheap desk. "You cooperate with the prosecutors we're bringing in tomorrow, or we release all of this to the media tonight. Your choice." Kang's hands trembled as he looked at the papers. "I want a lawyer." "You'll get one, in custody." The next morning, police arrived. Real police, with warrants and cameras. Kang was arrested on charges of child trafficking, document forgery, and operating an illegal adoption ring. The raid made the evening news, footage of him being led out in handcuffs, head down, trying to hide his face. The investigation expanded quickly. The Kim family, the prosecutors, the Gangnam elite who'd taken Esme, were brought in for questioning. Their involvement was murkier, harder to prove, but the pressure was immense. Prosecutor Kim was suspended pending investigation. His wife faced charges of participating in illegal adoption proceedings. Their reputations, carefully built over decades, crumbled in days. Within 2 months, the trial began. Kang received 3 years in prison, the maximum sentence. 2 of his associates got 18 months each. The Kim family avoided prison through their connections, but they paid hefty fines, disbarment for Prosecutor Kim, and social exile that meant more in their circles than any jail cell. 6 other families came forward during the investigation. 6 other children who'd been taken through Kang's network. Some were returned to their biological parents. Others, where the situations were more complicated, were placed in proper foster care while the courts sorted through the legal tangles. Minho watched the news coverage from his office, Ji-woo standing beside him. "Justice served," Ji-woo said quietly. Not justice. Accountability." Minho turned off the television. Justice would mean it never happened in the first place. 3 weeks after that conversation in the restaurant, Amina received a call. A woman's voice, professional and warm. "Miss Cole, this is the family court. We need you to come to our office tomorrow at 10 a.m. Your daughter will be here." Amina dropped the phone. The family court building was intimidating, all marble and echoing hallways. Amina sat in a waiting room, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. The lawyer Min-ho had hired sat beside her, explaining procedures she couldn't focus on. Then the door opened. A social worker stepped out, holding the hand of a small girl. She was taller than Amina remembered. Her curly hair had been straightened, pulled back in a neat ponytail. She wore clothes Amina had never seen. Expensive, pressed, foreign. But her eyes were the same. "Esme," Amina whispered. The girl looked up, confused, wary. "That's not my name." The words hit like a fist. Amina's lawyer touched her arm gently. "She's been called Yuna for a year. It'll take time." Amina stood on shaking legs. She wanted to run to her daughter, to scoop her up, to never let go. But she forced herself to move slowly. She knelt on the polished floor, making herself small, non-threatening. "Hi," she said softly. "Do you remember me?" Esme, Yuna, stared at her. "You left?" "I didn't want to. I've been trying to find you every single day. They said you didn't want me anymore." Amina's heart shattered. She swallowed hard. "That's not true. That was never true. I love you more than anything in this world." The girl's lower lip trembled. "I missed you. I missed you too. So much." Amina held out her arms, but didn't move closer. "Can I hug you?" For a long moment, Esme didn't move. Then, slowly, tentatively, she stepped forward. Amina wrapped her arms around her daughter, feeling the weight of her, the warmth, the realness. She smelled different. Expensive shampoo, fabric softener, other people's homes. But underneath, she was still Esme. "I'm here now," Amina whispered into her hair. "I'm not leaving again. I promise." Esme's small arms tightened around her neck. And finally, Amina let herself cry. The weeks that followed were hard in different ways. Esme, she refused to answer to Yuna anymore, was quiet, withdrawn. She had nightmares. She flinched at loud noises. She asked over and over if Amina was going to leave again. "Never," Amina told her each time. "I'm never leaving you. Never." She'd moved them to a small apartment in Mapogu, nothing fancy, but it was theirs. The walls were thin and the heating was temperamental, but Esme had her own room. Amina had bought second-hand furniture, painted the walls herself, hung fairy lights above Esme's bed. It was home. One evening, there was a knock at the door. Amina opened it to find Min-ho standing in the hallway, looking oddly out of place in his expensive suit. "Can I come in?" he asked. She stepped aside. He entered slowly, taking in the modest space. Esme peeked out from her room, curious. "Who's that, Mommy?" "A friend," Amina said, the word feeling strange in her mouth. "Go finish your drawing, baby." Esme disappeared. Min-ho waited until her door closed before speaking. "How is she?" "Adjusting. It's hard, but we're managing." "Good." He reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope. "This is for you." Amina took it warily. Inside was a check. Her eyes widened at the number. "I can't. You can. Use it to build your life back. Therapy for what you went through. Better apartment if you want. Education. Whatever you need. This is too much." "It's not enough." His voice was firm. "What happened to you shouldn't have happened. This is me making it right. You already did. You got her back." "No. I corrected a mistake. This is different." He moved toward the door, then paused. "If you need anything else, anything at all, call me." He handed her a card with a single phone number. "Anytime." "Why are you doing this?" Min-ho looked at her for a long moment. "Because you were desperate enough to sell yourself for $500, and I was wrong to take that deal. Because your daughter deserves a mother who isn't drowning. Because he stopped, jaw tightening. Because it's right. Before she could respond, Esme's door opened again. She padded out in her pajamas, clutching a drawing. "Is this for me?" she asked, looking up at Minho. He glanced down at the girl, then at Amina, who nodded slightly. He knelt to her level. "What did you draw?" "My mommy. She's a superhero." In the drawing, done in crayon, was a figure with brown skin and curly hair, wearing what looked like a cape. Minho studied it seriously. "She is," he said quietly. "She really is." Esme beamed. Then, in the way children do, she said, "Thank you for saving me and Mommy. I'll be forever grateful." She bowed, a gesture she'd learned from the family who'd taken her, now redirected towards someone who'd given her back. Minho's expression softened in a way Amina had never seen. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "Just be happy, both of you." He stood, nodded to Amina, and left. She stood holding the check, watching the door close, feeling something shift in her chest. Not love, not yet. But something like the beginning of it. Something like trust earned. 3 months later, Amina sat in a cafe in Hongdae, watching Esme color at the table beside her. The therapy was helping. The nightmares were less frequent. Esme laughed again. Real laughs. Her phone buzzed. A text from Minho. "How are things?" She typed back. "Good. Better than good. The check helped? You have no idea." A pause. Then, "Have dinner with me soon. Not business. Just dinner." Amina stared at the message. She thought about that night, about the woman she'd been, desperate and broken, about the man who'd seen her at her lowest and chose to lift her up instead of using her. She thought about the way Esme had smiled at him, about the card she kept in her wallet just in case, about the feeling she got when his name appeared on her screen. "Okay," she typed. "Just dinner." "Just dinner," he confirmed. Esme looked up from her coloring. "Who are you texting, Mom?" "A friend. The man who came to our house?" "Yes. I liked him. He had kind eyes." Amina smiled. "Yeah, he does." The dinner happened on a Friday evening. Minho chose a quiet restaurant in Itaewon, nothing flashy. They sat across from each other, the table small enough that she could see the details she'd missed before. The way his hands moved when he talked, careful and controlled. They talked about safe things at first, soul, weather, food. Then, slowly, the conversation deepened. "I shouldn't have accepted," Minho said suddenly. "That night, when you made your offer. You didn't force me." "No, but I knew you were desperate. I should have asked why. Should have helped instead of..." He stopped, jaw tight. "Instead of what? Taking what I offered?" Amina set down her chopsticks. "You gave me a choice. You stopped when you realized something was wrong. You didn't have to do that. You weren't a choice. You were a woman with none left. And no mother should ever be pushed that far." The words hung between them. Amina felt something crack in her chest, not breaking, but opening. "You fixed it. You gave me everything back." "I gave you what was already yours. Your daughter. Your dignity." He met her eyes. "I'm not a good man, Amina. The things I do, the people I work with. I'm not someone you should trust, but this the little I could do." "I trust you, Park Min-ho." "Why?" She thought about it. "Because when you saw me at my worst, you didn't look away. You didn't judge. You just helped. That doesn't make me good." "No, but it makes you better than you think you are." They sat in silence after. That, not uncomfortable, just present. When the bills came, Min-ho paid without discussion. They walked out into the Seoul night, the city alive with lights and movement. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Not for business, not for anything except Except to see you. Amina smiled. I'd like that. 6 months passed. They saw each other weekly, then twice weekly. Then it stopped being scheduled at all. He'd text, she'd respond, they'd meet. Sometimes with Esme, sometimes without. Esme warmed to him gradually. She'd sit next to him at restaurants, show him her schoolwork, tell him elaborate stories about her friends. He listened with the same serious attention he gave his business meetings, nodding in all the right places. One evening, after putting Esme to bed, Amina found Minho standing on her small balcony, looking out over the city. You don't have to do this, she said, joining him. All of this. You've already done more than enough. I'm not doing it because I have to. Then why? He turned to look at her. In the dim light, his features were softer, less guarded. Because when I saw you in my office that night, you reminded me of someone. Who? My mother. His voice was quiet. She was desperate once, too. Made choices she shouldn't have had to make. Survived things that should have broken her. He paused. I couldn't save her. But I could save you. Amina reached for his hand. He let her take it. I'm not your second chance, she said gently. But I'm here, right now, here for you. He pulled her closer, slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. When he kissed her, it was nothing like that first night. It was soft, careful, real. When they broke apart, she smiled. You know this is crazy, right? A single mom and a mafia boss? I've done crazier. Like what? Like falling for a woman who walked into my office and broke every rule I had. She laughed. The sound felt foreign and wonderful. I didn't break your rules. I just showed you that you had a heart under all that intimidation. Dangerous knowledge. I'll keep it safe, she said, almost teasing, before pulling him into a hug. 1 year after that night in his office, Amina stood in the same penthouse where it had all started. But everything was different now. Esme was curled up on the couch, sleeping peacefully under a blanket, her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. Minho stood at the window, watching the city lights. From the couch, Esme stirred. Uncle Minho? She'd started calling him that 3 months ago. Yes? Can you read me a story? He looked at Amina, who nodded. They walked over together, sat on either side of the little girl who'd been lost and found. Minho pulled out a book, one of the many he'd bought, Korean folktales with pictures. He began to read in his steady, careful voice. Amina listened, watching him with her daughter, and thought about that night 1 year ago. About the woman who'd stood in his office, naming her price, ready to trade pieces of herself for $500. That woman was gone. She'd been rebuilt into someone stronger, someone whole. But she'd never forget her. Because that woman, desperate, broken, determined, had been brave enough to do what needed to be done. And that bravery had led here, to this moment. Outside, Seoul glittered. Inside, they were home. The story had ended, but life was just beginning. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story moved you, please leave a like and subscribe for more stories like this. What do you think about Amina and Minho's journey? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next story.